Good morning, I'm Dick Johnson.
And I'm Crystal Clear.
And today we will be having our roundtable discussion with all of the candidates and their chosen party member.
Now, to begin the debate, we would like to start with a simple question. What are your views on immigration? Because we haven't touched on that subject yet. So whichever party is willing to go first, please speak.
Yes, America was built from the ground up by immigrants. And I'd like to go for a policy that makes it easier for immigrants to become American citizens. I believe it costs a lot of money to have a border controlled by American people, and I think it's unfair to turn away, for example, Mexican immigrants because we think they're going to take away jobs. The economy is not a net zero policy. You can gain from workers wanting to come into your country and to produce something for you.
I'm Ricardo Perez. Going back to what Matt just said about immigration, we also have to consider that our policies towards immigration, especially for the border with Mexico, over the past few years of like building more fences and building more borders, have really become not useful. Their passing through it has not worked. So we can see that we need to approach new subjects and we need to destroy the status quo and like create new policies to help instead of just destroying interactions with Mexico.
Well, for us, one of the biggest reasons that not only immigrants from Mexico, but around the world face is that there aren't a lot of working visas available for immigrants that want to come into the country legally. So we really want to increase this number, increase the number of work visas to allow more immigrants to naturalize and become a functioning part of the American society.
Well, the Democrats really believe that the time for comprehensive immigration reform is now. I mean, there are a lot of people who want to come to this country and, you know, basically try to live the American dream, try to do jobs, to have successful lives. And we really want to support them. There are certain things we can do. We believe in upholding an idea similar to that of the DREAM Act, which basically gives young Americans who came to this country legally through no fault of their own a path to citizenship if they either complete 2 years of college or serve 2 years in the military. We think that's a great start this issue.
Yeah, I think we all kind of agree on immigration. However, communism is not just a U.S. ideology, it's a global ideology. So the more people we can get to be included with us, the better. And with the new jobs that communism will provide, immigrant workers will be perfect for America.
Thank you.
Jessica, I know you mentioned the DREAM Act, and I know how it affects only the people that are like students who are going into college. What are your plans? Do you have any plans for, like, I don't know, say like their parents who actually came here, again, no fault of their own, they just came to look for a better life, but did it illegally?
Well, and that is an issue that we will have to address. I mean, there's not exactly a simple answer, but we do know that, I mean, advocating for their freedom, advocating for their success as well, and certainly not, you know, limiting that, not through anything like deportation, things like that. You know, that's all.
All right, if we have nothing more to add on this topic, I believe we have all had you prepare questions for each other. 2 questions per candidate, and they were given the opportunity to choose who they would ask and what they would ask about. So whoever wants to start, we're keeping this very open for them.
Feel free to go.
Matt Karinsky.
Yes.
You said in your platform that you will not provide government loans to students.
Yes.
Can you elaborate?
The issue of government loans is that it drives up the demand for college, and what happens is it actually works against the students. Although we're giving out money, we find that for every dollar we give to public students, the cost of public tuition goes up in about 97 cents. So it's counterproductive, and it actually just makes students spend more. And private tuition has gone up about $1.70. So really giving out loans, while it looks good at first, it's counterintuitive in the long run.
So you would say that most of the funding comes from tuition?
Yes.
According to California at Berkeley, only 13% of their total costs are from tuition.
Mm-hmm.
And now the problem, it's really easy to say that tuition is the main thing for colleges to get funding. It's not. The problem is that the baby boomers back in the 50s, they don't want to pay taxes on education anymore, and that's the problem here. Not the fact that the government is not including loans anymore. It's that there needs to be more loans, because that supports education, and it actually drives tuition down. Because tuition only counts for 13% of total fees.
Well, again, as we provide more loans, that tuition cost has actually gone up over the years. For every dollar we increase in Pell Grants, we found that public tuition has gone up by $1. Private tuition has gone up even more. It's not helping students to drive up these costs, even though that we're giving them more money.
Well, you can say that, but the numbers are not following that. Because most schools, their problem is not decreasing tuition, it's a decrease in the amount of government loans that are being provided. It's because people are cutting down on taxes, and that's being counterproductive. You're taking the problem and you're reassigning it to the government loans, and that's just not the problem here.
Well, another problem is the fact that we're limiting the educational markets by not making them free and open. Students need to realize that a four-year public university is not the only option they have at hand. We need to have students realize that community college, trade schools, and even like CEOs of like eBay and Bill Gates, for example, did not even pursue the college route. So there are other options available at hand, and I think having a nice free and fair market will help American students in the long run.
See, I agree with that, but you want to take away things like FAFSA, and that provides a huge support for students. Your plan is very long run. It's not something that's going to be implemented by other parties, and it's just that it's bound for failure. The government has always had a say in what students get for loans, and taking that away is only taking away a crutch for working citizens.
Well, I'm sorry, but the fact of the matter is, the short-run effect that we've been, or the short-run plan that we've been using by providing more money has not worked. College costs are still rising, so taking away loans is an option of reducing that.
Okay, thank you. We've had enough on this subject. If we could get some people from the other side, please, to ask some questions.
I'd like to cue Matt on the education issue for a second. So far in your platform, you've said that you are against loans for college students.
Government, yes.
Government loans for college students, and you're also looking to give poorer students the ability to go to different schools. Mm-hmm. Students who live in disadvantaged areas. How are students in those disadvantaged areas going to pay for their transportation? Because if the parents pay for it, you're making the families poorer by making the parents pay to send their kids farther away. And if the government pays for it, you're going against your less is more platform.
Well, for example, community colleges are in fact community. They're very easy and accessible, so I don't see an issue with students pursuing that route.
But if you're getting rid of government federal loans, you're saying that thus making higher education more affordable to everyone.
Yes.
But now you're saying that community college is an option for everyone. So are students going for higher education at a better price, or should poor students just go to community college because it's cheaper?
Poor students can go wherever they want. Community college is not lower education, it's still college, and they can transfer their credits that they earn into a four-year university.
Community college is not lower education.
It's not.
So how is there higher education? If community college is the lowest on the totem pole, how is there a higher education?
Higher education is just pursuing college in general. College as a whole is higher education that every citizen would be have the option to pursue.
If disadvantaged students want to go to, let's say, a higher education institution or a four-year university, and it happens to be more expensive, who do you think should foot the bill for that?
Students themselves. College is an investment. You're pursuing a higher education so that you can pursue a better career for yourself. In the long run, loans will accrue a small amount of interest, but that higher position that you earn from the education you receive will pay that off in the long run.
Well, you talk a lot about the American dream, but how can people who can't afford college afford the American dream?
Private loans. When you open it up to the free market sector, privatization causes a lot more competition, and while you will have to rely on loans, again, the interest rates will be lower, and fact that we're getting rid of government loans and Pell Grants will cause tuition costs to go down. So instead of taking loans out for $80,000 in today's situation, you'd only have to take out loans for maybe $20,000 of education.
So aside from eliminating federal grants for students, how is your system any different from what we have now?
It'd be different because we're getting away government's chokehold on the educational market. Again, grants and loans provided by the government cause costs to go up.
But now, there are going to be higher institutions, such as Harvard, that are going to cost high amounts, regardless of the cost. So are you saying if a child gets accepted and wants to go to Harvard, that they should default on a $100,000 loan at 6% at a private rate because they can't get a government loan?
No, I'm not saying they should default. When you go to Harvard, you're also taking that investment opportunity of connecting with people and interning and getting a very nice job in a higher position field. So while they will be taking more out in loans, they will also initially have a higher paying job.
All right, before we continue battering on Mr. Karinsky, I feel we have a bit of an issue with his education plan, but let's shift gears now to something different.
All right, I have a question for Ms. Russick regarding healthcare. In terms of Obamacare, thus far, more people have had their insurance terminated than have gotten insurance from the system. And most people, at least in the middle class, which I believe most of us represent, have seen their premiums go up. Is this not completely contrary to what the goal of your program was?
Well, really, I mean, the Affordable Care Act, I think it's too early to say what exactly it has done. I mean,
3 years is too early.
It's still in its infant stages, but the goal of the Affordable Care Act, is very, it's very strong. It's very, I mean, it is to help these middle class citizens. It is to advocate for their, you know, ability to earn.
The goal of the Affordable Care Act is the same as Matt's education for the disadvantaged children, for poor children, for families who can't afford it, is that families born into this role, families in poor areas who have to disperse their income, to spend their income in different ways, can afford to send their kid to the hospital when they're sick, can afford to go to the hospital when accidents happen. So that's what it's for.
Well, would you not agree that in doing this, you are taking from a great majority of the country in order to help a larger minority?
Well, no, I would not agree with that.
Do you think that we should start with things like tort reform and perhaps privatizing our health care so that instead of telling people where they can go to see a doctor, they can instead look for themselves?
Well, I mean, if you're talking about completely privatizing healthcare, I mean, that's an extreme disadvantage for our poor and elderly citizens.
Well, at the same time, your system is not providing everyone with equal health care. You're providing them with equal insurance, which is not the same thing. You have some of the best hospital institutions that are not included in Obamacare, such as the hospitals in Chicago, which are not an option then for your disadvantaged people. Would you say that's not unfair to them?
And then are you really helping them by just giving them minimal care? If you're saying that if the health care, everybody gets health, well, that's just barely minimum little Band-Aid on the side just to like maintain them. Is that really what we're trying to do to achieve the American dream?
Well, I think it's a little more than a Band-Aid on the side. I mean, these are people who are now getting access to medical care. I mean, these are doctors, these are hospitals that they can now go to receive treatment for illnesses that would otherwise have meant bankruptcy for them.
You're doing this at the cost of raising the debt ceiling. I mean, Obama's already done it. Eventually, you have to start clearing out the crap. There's constantly, Democrats have just continually raised the debt ceiling. That's why we almost defaulted. And you had your 3-year run with Obamacare and it's garbage. So, I mean, I don't know how much more time you would need.
Mr. Wilson, if we could refrain from using such dirty words in the debate, that would be great.
Please. No swear words in the newsroom, sir.
I apologize.
Thank you.
Well, you attack them for what I agree is a not very good policy, but how would you go about providing health care in your communist ways without spending much?
Not spending much is not an option. It's going to be taxes on the rich that are going to be moving us forward. Communism is all about equalizing
What if, I'm sorry, Ben,
economics.
what if the rich decide to leave the system because they feel they're being abused by it?
Yeah, how do you make everybody follow along with your plan in, let's say, 4 years of your
What if I
career?
simply just want to leave?
Well, the fact of the matter is that the rich are going to be an early crutch. And eventually we want to abolish the rich. The rich will be a thing of the past. Everybody's going to be equal. We're trying to bring the top end and bring it down into the world and bringing the low back up.
And eventually this crutch will be not needed because our socialized education system regarding self-betterment and fueling our economy with jobs that are staying in our country will eventually gain us the money necessary to continue on our path towards greater freedom.
But at the same time, if you're making everybody equal, isn't that also indirectly destroying the American dream?
Would you not agree that the protection of private property is one of the rights granted to the American people in our Constitution?
The government has the right to seize private land. And if you can look me in the face and tell me golf courses are a fair use of land, I would completely disagree with you, and our environment.
It's not a matter of fair use, it's a matter that I have the right to do whatever I want with that land. It's my land, it's my private property.
Well, I mean, what would you do with it?
That could be recreational activities. You know, I could be a working citizen and then go to that golf course to let some stress off.
And that can't be government subsidized?
Or there's also professional golf courses. And also going back to education in your academies, just a really quick question. What would happen if somebody's like an artist, I don't know, a musician, a golf player? Are those jobs that your system and your academies fall into and they will like support and pay for?
Yeah, it's not going to be a complete, like, the government's not going to control everything. It's obviously, it's still going to go off of need. That's always how it's been. These academies are going to cater to what people want. And that's also something that's always been available,
So there's going to be millions of academies?
Not millions, I mean, how many, okay, this academy thing, it's arranged into kind of a guild system. It's going to have these smaller groups, the kind of grunt work that that America's been built on, and it's going to kind of go into a pyramid. The top is going to be like the designers and stuff, and you move up for self-betterment, not for money.
More importantly than these academies, Ben, is you're talking about our Affordable Health Care Act, and you're talking about how it's been spinning its wheels and it's just been sitting for 3 years. You claim that, and then you talk about these academies, and you're not for reforming our education. You're for starting from scratch. You're for implementing a brand new system. That's going to take so long. That's going to take your entire presidency to set up. You're going to be elected, and for 4 years you're going to be setting up these academies, taking away from other issues. Whereas the rest of us, we're talking about reforming, we're talking about parts that don't work or that don't work as well, and talking about fixing those.
But see, you're just looking at education as a singularity. Education goes into the job market too. That's one of America's biggest problems right now, is creating jobs. Our education reforms caters to this. This is all about bringing people out of the stratosphere and bringing them into the job market. And so I don't get what you're saying.
You say that people in these academies, they can switch. If they don't like what academy they're in, they can go to a different one and they can find a new job, correct? And these academies are free. What's going to stop a person from just spending their whole life learning, switching, saying, hey, this is free, I'm going to learn how to do this now, and then I'm going to go to this one, and I'm going to learn how to do this now. When do they, are you going to force them to get jobs?
No, there's going to be incentives. There's going to be tax incentives.
Who provides these incentives?
For equality-wise incentives.
Incentives sounds strictly capitalist to me.
Incentives is not a strictly capitalist thing. There's
it is. Incentive is the idea of giving a profit or reward for completing something. That does not fall under the lines of communism.
It's not
the communal effort.
An incentive is not a profit. An incentive is a reason to do something.
An incentive is a reward.
And that's not
something for your work.
Please. We would like, if anyone has any questions for the Republican Party, we haven't really touched on them yet, so we would love to. Mr. Stearns.
Yes, Mr. Stearns, I have a question for you. we've heard a lot about your personal views on such social issues as marriage equality, but and they seem to be very moderate, but they seem to be out of tune with your party's overall views, especially considering your party's support for, say, the Defense of Marriage Act, which basically denied federal rights to same-sex couples, or your party's support for such policies as don't ask, don't tell in the military.
Well, yes, it doesn't completely align with my party's traditional views, as I believe I've said, but it is a much more moderate compared to where typical conservatives usually lie, and it's a more moderate view, so I don't really quite understand what you're asking. Yes, it doesn't completely follow my typical party lines.
But I mean, do you think your party would support you in these views? Because it seems that historically and recently they have not.
I think that my party, or I'd hope at least that my party would realize that their traditional views, while simply views, but they need to be changed, basically, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, then how do you expect over like such a big course of time where they just didn't change their views until like the point where you come in and then they automatically change their views altogether?
Well, we believe that letting the states decide, in a regional sense, what is best for the people under their jurisdiction is the best way to let people make up their minds about this.
Well, I get
in
that,
more conservative areas, we believe that the state will be aware of the fact that their constituencies are more conservative, and this is their right to have that choice in their community.
If a state decides that same-sex marriage is not allowed, doesn't that sound like 1956 where we had restaurants saying blacks couldn't eat there? That sounds like segregation. That's taking a step back in American progress.
And you're also guys thinking too much ahead. You guys are also really kind of going back to what Jessica started saying. How are you expecting to get your whole party on board to your new moderate views? If to like fully support you, how do you expect them to like say it's like, okay, we believe completely what you say?
Well, with what Matt just brought up, there's no correlation between not allowing people to like a different race to eat in your restaurant is not the same as not allowing a marriage between two members.
It is the
of
same. You're saying two partners cannot be together.
No, you're not saying they can't be together. They're still civil unions. Civil union isn't the same as marriage. It brings the same things, but it's not the same thing.
So
you still have civil union, and that's not saying they can't live together.
But you can't file a joint tax return. You can't.
Civil union.
You can't.
It's always been left to the state, and that's not what the people want. The people have always been pushing for the federal government to make it legal.
Everyone wants that?
Everyone should want the choice to have it.
The gay people definitely want it. That's why there's always protests. It's always been left to the states, and it's not going to work.
So, all right, like you were saying, my view is not completely following my traditional conservative party lines, but the civil rights that took place, they didn't happen in a day. And we are really trying to take a step back from views that people view as unjust and whatever other terms you may have for them. And to get my party to follow along, you have to take baby steps. You can't just jump for the whole thing.
You're running with a party whose views you disagree with?
Traditionally, yes.
If there's one thing you're taking a step back from, it's social freedom. Someone should have the right to have a choice to marry a same-sex partner. That should not be a state's decision. It should be a person's decision.
Well, I believe our party, and I speak for that party when I say that I do not think that you can legislate social change. Even if you say that same-sex marriage is legal, or any of the following social issues that stem from such an issue, you cannot legislate a change in a person's mind. There's still going to be discrimination and hatred, and that's not something that you can sign a law to change. Obviously, there are viewpoints that need to be altered in a new century, but simply by signing a bill, it doesn't change the way people feel about them. It doesn't change the way they treat their neighbors. So, in essence, what our party is running on is a gradual sense of change, in which acceptance comes to the forefront of what the American people believe. But you can't demand people to do that simply by saying it's legal. You can't say that mothers and fathers will not be upset if their children come out to them. You can't say that they're going to change just because you as a party want them to. That's not what we're looking for from the American people, and demanding that is too much.
We're not saying...
You have the 13th Amendment. I mean, you have the abolition of slavery, that had to.
Are you
take
equating
place.
same-sex marriage to slavery?
And even
It's-
after the passage of
it's
that
a
act,
social
it's not
issue.
as if civil rights suddenly became a non-issue. It's not as if racism stopped. We are not living in a post-racial
right
America.
direction.
It is a step in the right direction, but if you try to force such a thing on people, their psychological standpoint is not going to change. We believe in having a gradual shift.
But
So you're
this
just going to
issue-
wait for people to.
You can't force people.
You don't
But
have
you
to force
can't-
people to like it. However, as a community, when you realize that everyone has the choice and freedom to pick whatever they want, there starts to be that general acceptance of, hey, there's going to be people different than me, and I can respect them for their views. I don't necessarily have to like it, but I can respect it.
Building off what Matt said, you don't have to facilitate the change in people's hearts and minds, but you should facilitate the means for people to exact their freedom and allow for that change to happen. The change in people's view on racism overall did not happen in a day. It's gradually changing, and America has shown to be, in some parts, has shown racism, but we are waiting for change to happen, and change will happen with assimilation and other cultural aspects.
Well, I don't think we believe that the only way to instill social change in America is through legislation. We believe in that the American people know that assimilation is going to occur, and they will change their social issues. We don't think that imposing legislation on people from a federal standpoint is the way to go about this. We think that it should be a gradual change for people.
You are imposing legislation by banning it. Well,
Not at a federal level.
If a state decides, that's legislation.
I mean, if
We're
you're not
talking federal
catering,
legislation.
you're not catering to that side, you're also catering to the other side. The opposition is always going to have a chance to rebuttal you, and with making it government sanctioned, you don't have that opposition. It's going to move it forward. So I don't see how having the government involved is a detriment.
I'm not sure what you're asking.
I think it's having the government behind you on social issues has always helped. Like, there's no way that it's a detriment. It's always pushed it forward.
what about prohibition? The United States' entire basis on prohibition was public opinion, and
I believe that's the case in our favor, in that prohibition was obviously a social issue that the government tried to legislate against, and it clearly did not work.
it was on the basis of public desires. You gave
And
the
it was
people what they
repealed
want,
shortly
and you
after.
figured out what
Crime
happened.
rates spiked. I don't believe that's in any way helping your argument.
In contrast, crime rates did not spike. The mafia had a huge handle on alcohol, and they were rum runners when it was actually illegal. And once you legalized it and put it on a storefront, crime rates went down. The mafia could not make any money off of
Yeah,
that.
that's what
Okay,
we're saying.
thank
We're
you.
saying when prohibition was enacted, that's when crime rates went up.
All right.
Thank
we're
you all
going
for your
to,
time.
yes, thank
Bring
you
this
very
debate
much.
to a close.
I think it was quite successful, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us.
And this has been your EHSBC with Crystal Clear.
And Dick Johnson.
Thank you and have a wonderful day.
Thank you. This has been your roundtable discussion, brought to you by EHSBC.
Please join us next week for our first 2014 presidential debates.
I'm Dick Johnson,
And I'm Crystal Clear.
and thank you for joining us.
See you next week.